The first time I realized something was off, it was the middle of the night, and I woke up to the sound of my bedroom blinds shifting. Not wind, not the AC vent, something deliberate, something human. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the faint silhouette on the other side of the window. For a split second, I thought I imagined it, until the slats shifted again, just barely, like someone trying not to be seen. I lunged out of bed and yanked the blinds open. Empty backyard, nothing but shadows. My motion light flicked on, but all it revealed was my fence and a silent street beyond. Still, my skin crawled. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a raccoon, maybe the wind. Except the very next night, it happened again. The soft sound of blinds brushing against each other. Then, silence. That was when I started noticing other things. My garbage can moved 6 inches closer to the fence. The latch on my backyard gate, always locked, was slightly bent like someone had forced it. And worst of all, my bathroom window, where I never left the blinds open, was cracked open one morning when I was absolutely sure I'd closed it. That's when suspicion turned into dread. And like clockwork, the very next week, I caught him. I stepped outside one evening to grab a package from the porch, and across the street, standing in the faint glow of his porch light, was my neighbor, Mark. He was staring directly at me. Not just casual looking, staring. When I made eye contact, he didn't flinch. He just smiled. Mark was one of those guys who blended in perfectly. Early 40s, divorced, worked from home, kept his yard neat, waved to the mailman. He was normal, the kind of neighbor you never think twice about. But that night, his smile made my blood turn cold. I waved awkwardly, trying to play it cool, but my mind was racing. Could he be the one? The answer came faster than I expected. 2 nights later, I was scrolling on my phone in bed when I noticed a faint glow outside. Not moonlight, artificial. I slowly lifted the blinds an inch and froze. There he was, Mark, standing in the shadows, holding up his phone, the screen faintly lit as he pointed it directly at my bedroom window. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but I hesitated. What would I even say? My neighbor is outside looking at my house? They'd roll their eyes and say, unless he broke in, there's nothing we can do. I closed the blinds and sat in silence, heart hammering. That was the moment the fear started to turn into something else. Anger. This wasn't just some creepy accident. He was watching me, recording me, probably thinking he was too smart to ever get caught. But that's where he was wrong. Because while he thought he was the hunter, I decided then and there I'd make him the prey. If you're still with me up to this point, don't forget to like and subscribe. It keeps me motivated to share more crazy true stories like this one. Now, let me tell you how I turned my neighbor's obsession
After that
into
night,
his worst
I didn't
nightmare.
sleep much. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of light outside made me freeze. I started to notice patterns. Mark's porch light always came on exactly 5 minutes after mine. His dog never barked at me, but barked at everyone else. He'd leave for walks at 11 p.m., right when I turned in. One Saturday morning, I decided to test something. I opened my blinds halfway and left a decoy, an old phone propped on the windowsill, screen glowing like I was scrolling late at night. Then, I turned off the lights and sat in the dark corner of my room, camera in hand. It took 20 minutes. There was a faint rustle outside, then the unmistakable click of a phone camera. Through the tiniest slit in the blinds, I caught him. Mark, crouched at the fence line, leaning forward with his phone like a paparazzi. My hands trembled as I hit record. This time, I had something. But just as quickly, the doubts flooded in. A blurry video of a guy standing outside isn't a crime. He could say he was looking for his cat or checking his fence. I needed something undeniable. So, I started digging. First, his trash. Every Wednesday night, I took my garbage out just as he dragged his bins to the curb. While he went back inside, I slipped a small Bluetooth tracker under the lid of his can. I'd programmed it to ping my phone whenever it moved more than 30 feet. 3 days later, at 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. The tracker was moving. I pulled up the location. Not the curb, my backyard. Heart racing, I dialed 911. By the time the patrol car rolled up, the tracker had stopped moving, but when the cops searched, Mark was gone. The only thing they found was my gate slightly ajar. The officer shrugged. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a misunderstanding. One even chuckled, "You watch too many true crime shows." I was furious. This wasn't paranoia anymore. I doubled down. I bought a Wi-Fi camera the size of a USB stick and planted it in my window frame. Another behind my TV, pointing at the hallway, and one disguised as an air freshener on the porch. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th, at 2:47 a.m., I got the alert. Motion detected. I opened the live feed. There he was, Mark, in my yard, hood up, flashlight off, moving like he owned the place. He walked straight to my bathroom window and tried the latch. My heart hammered so hard the phone shook in my hands. I thought about calling 911 again, but a wild thought hit me. What if I let him think he was still winning? That night, as I lay awake, a plan began to take shape. I wasn't going to wait for the cops to take me seriously. I wasn't going to beg for help. I was going to set a trap he couldn't wriggle out of. And I'd make sure the whole street saw exactly who he really was. If you're still watching up to this point, smash that like button. It lets me know you're ready for the next part, because this is where things start to get crazy. The next week, I started building my trap.
I didn't sleep that week. I barely left the house except for work and to buy supplies that made me feel less helpless. I read forums, watched videos on neighborhood watch tactics, and sketched plans on a legal pad until the lines blurred. I wanted something clean, undeniable, and public. No chance for Mark to gaslight, no room for shrugging it off as harmless curiosity. What I imagined was simple. make him act in a way that couldn't be explained away, and make sure everyone watched. First, I needed bait he couldn't resist. I thought about what drew him: windows, late-night movement, the thrill of thinking he was unseen. So I staged a scene that looked effortless. Me leaving the living room light on, the curtains slightly parted, an expensive-looking camera tripod set by the window, as if I were vlogging at midnight. Only the tripod had a dummy camera, just enough reflection to tempt a peeper. But next to it, I hid the real prize, a quality body cam worn under a hoodie with a live stream link only I controlled. If he came for the tripod, the second camera would capture everything: clear audio, clear video, and a live transmission I could send to people in real time. Next, I recruited a tiny crew. Not vigilantes, just 3 people I trusted implicitly. My friend Jenna from work, who'd once covered for me on a shift. Marco, the neighbor from 2 houses down who'd always complained about late-night noise. And my brother, who owed me a favor for helping him move last year. I briefed them on the plan in careful, clipped sentences. Arrive at 1:30 a.m., be ready to live stream on my private channel. Be prepared to shout for help on cue, and do not, under any circumstances, engage physically. Everyone nodded like they knew what was at stake. I could see it in their faces, the mix of fear, anger, and something fierce that felt a lot like solidarity. Then I created a second layer of credibility: public witnesses. I reached out to the neighborhood Facebook group and posted a vague message about recent break-ins and suspicious activity, emphasizing community vigilance. I printed flyers about a neighborhood safety meeting at my house for the following week. Nothing too specific, but enough to make people curious. That way, if anything happened, I could truthfully say the community had been warned, and nobody would be able to claim this was a private vendetta. Small, annoying, and legal. Everything I wanted. On Thursday night, I executed the setup. I placed the dummy tripod in the living room, much more visible than it needed to be, angling it like an amateur creator would to catch a flattering light. I tucked the real body cam under a hoodie hanging on a coat rack, its lens peeking out at just the right angle. I tested the live stream feed twice: stable, crisp, recorded to cloud storage, and also routed to a private link only my 3 friends had. I left motion lights on outside and propped a porch speaker to play low, muffled TV noise, making my apartment sound occupied and casual. Then, I shut off my phone and waited. At 2:12 a.m., my doorbell camera pinged. My heart stopped for a second, an involuntary physical reaction that told me how close I was. I texted Jenna, "Now." She texted back, "At your side." Marco whispered through the back door as he slipped into the yard like a ghost. My brother crouched near the fence with his phone recording the exterior. I sat perfectly still on my couch, the only light a soft glow from the hallway, pretending to be the careless live-in roommate I'd faked for the cameras. A shadow moved at the edge of the curtains. He was careful, too careful, peering in through the fabric like a thief rehearsing a crime in his head. My breath slowed. I could hear him swallow. And then he eased the window latch with practiced hands and slid inward like a cat, thinking he'd be unseen and silent. When he stepped inside, the body cam under the hoodie captured his face in brutal clarity. He didn't bother to hide his astonishment at the dummy camera. He walked straight toward it and reached out, like a child taking a prize. That was his error. In the split second his fingers brushed the tripod, Jenna's voice thundered from the speaker I'd propped by the entry. "Police! He's breaking in!" The script we'd rehearsed worked flawlessly. Marco's phone was already live streaming the garden angle. My brother was shouting into the mic to neighbors, and Jenna, from across the street, started filming with a bright flashlight. Mark froze. For the first time, the predator looked like a man caught in headlights. He turned, searching for an escape route, but the yard was alive. Porch lights snapped on, voices from houses 2 doors down, a car pulling up with a neighbor leaning out and craning to look. The live feed I controlled had switched from private to a broader link I'd texted to 2 neighbors earlier, just in case. Within a minute, dozens of people were watching a man in my home on their phones. He made a last, desperate move towards the back door, but Marco was already there, standing tall, though his hands were shaking. He called the non-emergency police line and gave them the address and a running commentary. Mark tried to shove past him. Marco didn't budge. The chaos of lights and voices was enough, the kind of messy, public spectacle no one wants to be part of, and the exact opposite of the hush-hush corners Mark preferred. When the police car finally arrived 5 minutes later, the officer's radio crackled as a dozen neighbors corroborated the live feed. This time, with public witnesses and streaming evidence, there was no shrug, no casual dismissal. The officer cuffed Mark right in my living room while the stream recorded every slow-motion, humiliating detail. He looked at me then, no longer amused, no longer smug, but terrified and humiliated. And for a shining moment, I felt the weight of all the nights he'd stolen from me. If you're loving this slow burn justice, hit like. This is the point where the plan pays off. My plan had 2 things going for it: spectacle and community. It turned his secrecy into an uncomfortable show, and it forced people to choose sides in real time. It didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like the correction of a blind balance. When the police let him out, his neighbors stepping forward to take photos and ask questions, he mouthed something I'd heard before: "You'll never catch me." This time, the words made him look smaller than they'd ever made me.
The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The live stream clips had already spread through the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had even sent it to the local news with the headline, "Man caught breaking into neighbor's home on live video." When I stepped outside to get the mail, 2 different neighbors stopped me. One of them, a retired teacher I'd only waved at before, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Thank you. We've all noticed him. We were scared to say anything." That's when it hit me. It wasn't just my trap. It had been a silent line of people waiting for someone to make a move. Mark's face was on every phone. Not because I wanted revenge porn, but because people had recorded it live. There was no way to frame this as harmless curiosity now. It was him, inside my living room, going for my property, caught by multiple angles and multiple people. That afternoon, the police came back to take a formal statement. This time, the tone was different. No eye rolls, no, maybe it's just a misunderstanding. They already had his devices. They'd already found the tiny cameras he'd planted not just at my window, but at others' homes too. When they told me that, I felt the floor tilt. It was never just me. Within days, other victims surfaced. a woman from across the street found a wireless microphone behind her porch light. A couple down the block discovered their Wi-Fi had been breached by a device Mark installed in their garage. He had been running a private show of our lives, and no one had known. The neighborhood that had once been isolated, garage doors down, eyes averted, suddenly became a network of people comparing notes, screenshots, and security footage. Marco's front yard turned into a kind of impromptu meeting space. Jenna set up a private group chat for everyone. My brother started printing out tips for low-cost home security. What had felt like me versus him now looked like an entire block versus a pattern of abuse. When the court date arrived, I didn't even have to testify for long. The DA had more than enough evidence. My live feed, the cameras recovered from his apartment, the digital logs of his hacking attempts. Mark sat at the defense table in a cheap suit, hair slicked down, hands clasped like a chastised child. He didn't look like the man who once smirked, "You'll never catch me." He looked like someone about to lose everything. When the verdict came, multiple counts of unlawful surveillance, trespassing, attempted burglary, he didn't even look at me. He just stared at the table. And for the first time in months, I breathed. The night after sentencing, Jenna brought over pizza. Marco cracked open a beer and laughed for the first time since the whole thing started. My brother sat on the porch scrolling through the group chat full of thank you messages. I realized then that what we'd done wasn't just a sting. It had been a reclamation. He thrived on our silence and isolation. The trap worked because it forced a public reckoning. The best part? Nobody saw me as paranoid anymore. Nobody doubted. People started greeting each other, offering to walk kids to school, setting up real neighborhood watch meetings. My house felt like mine again. A week later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single scrap of paper with one sentence written in Mark's blocky handwriting. "You got me." No threats, no excuses, just that. I slid it back into the envelope and filed it away with the rest of the evidence, not out of fear, but as a reminder. People like him always leave a trail, and when you're patient and deliberate, the trap practically builds itself. If you've been in the situation where someone abuses power or hides behind secrecy, don't underestimate your ability to turn the tables. You don't need to be a hero. You just need a plan, people you trust, and a way to bring things into the open. That's what ended him. Not anger, not shouting, just light, community, and patience. If you're still watching, hit like. Because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for a story like this to remind them they're not crazy and they're not alone.